My presentation is on canines in Vietnam. The canine is a very sophisticated and intelligent animal that humans have for some time now found a lot of use in, found to be a great asset to us. In this day and age, they're used in many ways, such as police dogs, guide dogs for the disabled, therapy dogs, or even just as household pets. It was decided that they could be a great asset to the United States and Vietnam, and around 4,000 of them were shipped off to aid the soldiers in the war and be used with handlers. Various breeds of canines had been used in past wars with militaries, using hundreds of different breeds. But in Vietnam, they only found use with two breeds, one being the German Shepherd and the other being the Labrador Retriever. German Shepherds were given 3 different jobs, depending on what they found they needed the most use in at that time. The first was the scouting dogs. If a German Shepherd was a scouting dog, it would be placed at walking point, which means they would walk ahead of the soldiers in order to be able to warn them of anything from enemy movement to landmines or food supplies, anything of that sort. The reason that the German Shepherds were put at walking point is because it's the most vulnerable position, and they have the senses that would allow them to detect things that a human wouldn't be able to if a human was put at walking point. The second job that they were given was sentry patrol dogs. And what they would do is the handler would usually take them around perimeter of the defense areas or military areas, basically just guarding what was inside, whether it be aircraft, military supplies, stuff like that. The last thing the German Shepherd was used was mines and tunneling dogs. They'd sniff out mines and booby traps throughout the various terrain on roads and bridges and find any hidden tunnels throughout the jungles that the enemies might be hiding in or that the army could use at that point. Labrador Retrievers were only used for tracking, and they would track the enemy's scent or blood trails in order to be able to find the enemy and re-engage in combat. But these canines became so much more than just military assets. They built bonds with their handlers because the handlers and the dogs did everything together, from eating and sleeping to fighting on the front line. It was estimated that these canines saved around 10,000 soldiers throughout the war. I mean, they were the reason that 10,000 soldiers were able to come home to their friends and family and not come home in a casket. They were doing their job so well, in fact, that the enemy placed a bounty on the canines. And many times the enemy usually wouldn't want to mess with a dog handler or his dog because they knew it was trouble. There was one presentation that I went to at Regis University where a dog handler from Vietnam talked. His name was Rick Claggett, and he had his talk Wartime, Vietnam War. And kind of his background was he was drafted in 1970 into the U.S. Army, and after completing basic training and infantry training, went through training to become a dog handler. He was assigned a 6-year-old German Shepherd named Big Boy, who was already at that time a 4-year veteran, unlike him who was just getting started. And Big Boy saved his life on 2 different occasions that he told us about. The first time, Big Boy found a tripwire vibration that was a mechanical trap that would have set off a bomb had he not found it before one of the soldiers activated it, saving their lives. So that was kind of a big deal. The second instance that Big Boy saved his life, Big Boy stopped and sat with his hair raised up all of a sudden, and he pointed out a hidden enemy to Rick and his company before the enemy was able to ambush them, and so they had the upper hand and were able to therefore ambush the enemy before they had a chance to ambush them. Rick said that it was a real security blanket to have him with me when talking about Big Boy, because no one wanted to mess with a dog handler, and Big Boy was able to save his life on more than one occasion. And although they were only together for 8 months, Rick said it was long enough to build a bond that will last a lifetime. However, after the war was over, he was forced to leave Big Boy behind, and he said he could see the look of abandonment in Big Boy's eyes when he was saying goodbye, which made it one of the most heart-wrenching things to think about to this day. After the war, of the 4,000 dogs sent to Vietnam, 1,000 of them were killed, and after the war the rest of them were classified as military equipment, which led to three fates: to either be euthanized by their handler, left to survive on their own, or sent to the South Vietnamese army to continue their work as military dogs. This distraught many of the soldiers because they were forced to leave behind what many of them would call their best friends over in Vietnam and some of their closest companions, and that took a toll on them because of what these dogs had done for them. One dog handler remembers the canine graveyard that they had there called Freedom Hill, and it consisted of wooden crosses draped with dog tags, and on the arch of the entrance it read, "In memory of these scout dogs, who were truly man's best friend." And I guess it just goes to show the respect these handlers had for their dogs and how much they meant to them after their time serving together. And these soldiers knew that the dogs deserved better for all that they had done, and they were so much more than just military equipment, because many soldiers would not be here if it weren't for the dogs. There was a memorial fundraising effort because, as one soldier put it, "We betrayed them once. We cannot do it again." And the dogs provided comfort and companionship to these soldiers in a time of real fear in their lives, and many of these soldiers were young men that were drafted straight out of high school, some of them barely even 18, and they're thrown to the war to fight for their country, and these dogs were the only comfort that they were going to find, yet at the end the dogs were left behind. And I don't know, I guess overall, going back over the speech, these dogs did much more than just their job in Vietnam. They provided security and companionship to the soldiers when they needed them most. Thousands of soldiers were able to come home to their families alive because of these dogs, yet the military decided to classify them as military assets and leave them behind to either fend for themselves, be euthanized, or if they were lucky enough to continue serving, if that's that great of a fate. Even though many soldiers fought to adopt their dogs because of the bonds that they had formed between them, it was almost completely unsuccessful for all the soldiers that tried, and many of them didn't even try because they knew that it wasn't going to happen. And I guess these dogs weren't given the honor that they truly deserved after everything that they had done.